Good day, everyone. We will be discussing legal and ethical issues and special and inclusive education. So, legal and ethical issues and special and inclusive education centered on ensuring that all students, regardless of disability, receive a fair and equitable education. So, these involve several key areas. So, first, we have rights of students with disabilities. Second, confidentiality and privacy, and lastly, equity and social justice. So, what is rights of students with disabilities? Students with disabilities have specific legal rights designed to ensure they receive equal access to education and are treated fairly in the school system. So, here's the three key concepts include. So, first we have FAPE or free and appropriate public education. Second, LRE, least restrictive environment, and lastly, non-discriminatory practices. So, what is free and appropriate public education? Every student with a disability has the right to receive an education at no cost to the family that is tailored to their individual needs, meaning all students with disabilities get a free public education designed to meet their specific needs. The services must be appropriate to the child's educational requirements, not necessarily the best possible services, but appropriate ones. It is not about the best possible services, but the services that are right for the child learning. For example, Maria has dyslexia. Her FAPE might include a special education teacher who provides extra reading support, assistive technology like a teach text to speech program, and modified assignments to account for her learning differences. These services are free to her family and are tailored to help Maria succeed in school. They might not be the very best possible services available everywhere, but they are appropriate to Maria's needs. Next is least restrictive environment. Students with disabilities must be educated with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate. Removal to separate classes or special school should happen only when the nature or severity of the disability prevents satisfactory education in a regular classroom, meaning students with disabilities should learn with non-disabled peers as much as possible. Separation only happens if their disability makes it impossible to learn in regular classroom, even with extra help. For example, a student with ADHD can likely learn in a regular classroom with extra support from a teacher's aid and modified learning plan. This is the LRE. However, a student with severe autism might need a more specialized classroom setting because a regular classroom wouldn't meet their needs even with support. Last is non-discriminatory practices. School must use non-biased valid methods to evaluate students. Students cannot be placed in special education progress solely based on culture, language, or socioeconomic status. Assessment tools must be fair and individualized, meaning school must fairly assess students for special education, avoiding bias based on the background or culture. Tests and evaluation must be appropriate for each student. So, what is confidentiality and privacy? Confidentiality is a fundamental ethical and legal requirement in education, especially in special and inclusive education, meaning student information, especially about disabilities, must be kept private and confidential. This is about ethically right and legally required. So here's the key concepts include. So we have handling student records, access to information, and FERPA and similar laws. What is handling student records? Teachers, administrators, and service providers must protect sensitive information about student disabilities, health condition, family background, and individualized education programs. Meaning, school staff must keep student information private, including details about disabilities, health, family, and IEP. For example, a teacher has a student with a learning disability who receives extra support. The teacher needs to access the student's IEP or individualized education program to understand the student's need and provide appropriate accommodations. However, the teacher should not share this information with other teachers or staff members who don't need to know. Next, access to information. Only individuals who are directly involved in the student's education and support are allowed access to these records. Sharing information without consent is both unethical and many countries illegal. Access to information is the same as the handling student records, but access to information is when you sharing the IEP without the student or their parents' consent would be unethical and possibly illegal. So it against the law. Next is FERPA and similar laws. So both the US and the Philippines have the law to protect students' personal information. So FERPA in the US stands for the Family Educational Rights and Private Act. It's a US law that says schools can share a student information like grades or attendance with anyone without permission. This law gives parents or student over 18 the right to see their school records and ask for changes if they wrong. The Data Privacy Act of 2012 is a Philippines law that protects everyone's personal information, including students. It means schools and other organizations can just share your information without your consent. This law also helps you understand how your information is used and gives you the right to ask for it to be corrected or deleted. So, in simple terms, both laws are about keeping your school information private and giving you control over it. Next, equity and social justice. Equity in special education means giving each student what they specifically need to succeed, recognizing that equal treatment is not always fair treatment. So, meaning fairness in special education means giving each student the specific support they need to succeed, not just treating everyone the same. Like, for example, assessment methods. Equal treatment might involve giving all students the same standardized test. Fair treatment acknowledges that a student with a learning disability might need alternative assessment methods like an oral exam or modified test to demonstrate their understanding. Here's the key concepts include: first, addressing marginalized populations. Second, culturally responsive education. And lastly, advocating for inclusive systems. Next is addressing marginalized populations. Some students, like those from low income families, indigenous groups, or English language learners, face additional barriers to quality education. Special education services must be responsive to these intersectional challenges, meaning students from disadvantaged backgrounds like low income, indigenous, non native English speakers often face extra challenges in school. Special education needs to address these extra difficulties. Like, for example, an indigenous student with autism. So this student may require culturally sensitive teaching methods that respect their indigenous language and cultural practices while addressing their autism related needs. A one size fits all approach that doesn't account for their cultural background may be ineffective and even harmful. Next is culturally responsive education. Instruction and assessment must respect the cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic diversity of students. Schools must avoid mislabeling students from minority groups as having disabilities simply because of language barriers or cultural differences. Meaning, culturally responsive education means respecting and valuing the diversity of students in the classroom. This includes their cultural backgrounds, languages, and socio-economic situation. So, like for example, imagine a teacher who has a student who is new to the country and is still learning English. Instead of assuming the student has a learning disability because they struggle with English, the teacher recognizes that the student is simply learning a new language. So, the teacher might like use visual aids and gestures or pair the student with a fluent English speaker. And last, advocating for inclusive systems. Educators have an ethical duty to challenge biases, advocate for equitable resource distribution, and create inclusive schools environments where every learner can thrive. Meaning, teachers should fight against unfairness, make sure all the students have the resources they need, and create schools where everyone can succeed. So, like for example, challenging biases. A teacher notices a disproportionate number of students from a particular ethnic background being placed in the special education classes. They research the issue, gather data, and present their findings to the school administration, advocating for a review of the referral process to ensure it's free from bias. They might suggest alternative support strategies to avoid unnecessary special education placements. So, overall, this lesson emphasizes the crucial legal and ethical consideration within special and inclusive education. It highlights the importance of respecting student rights, protecting privacy, ensuring equity, and advocating for inclusive systems that value diversity and support all learners. And that's all. Thank you.